Hey there folks. So in this video what we're going to do is look at setting up our four-way character movement for our top-down kind of character. Now you might be looking at this and going, well, I've just done the side scroller, why do I need to do the top-down? And that might be the case. Maybe you've got a side scroller game that you're creating, but there are going to be elements of the top-down character that may still be useful. So even if you just work through these and just understand what we can do with the top-down character in terms of having the directionality, having one input that can feed into multiple different directions, and how we can actually use one sprite sheet or one sprite animation sequence in the ZD source in order to handle that. So what I've got at the moment is I've got this kind of test area where you can see I've got my side scroller, and what I'm just going to quickly do is I'm just going to have a variation of this set up for a top-down character as well. So I'm just going to call this one my SS demo, and it's going to ask me, are you sure you want to do this, because I've got it open. I'm going to create myself a new level. It's just going to be a basic level, and I'm going to save this one. So we'll save this. If we go save current level as, let's go into our maps folder. And this one can be our top down, so TD demo level. And this will just be where I test out my top down content. Now, what do I need to actually worry about in here? Well, we already have a bunch of blueprints, and we've got already our game mode, our ZD game mode. So one of the things that I could do is I could create a duplicate of this. I'm going to say maybe a duplicate because then we can have a side scroller version and a top down version. We could go with a child blueprint class and just change and edit some of the options that have been set up in there, and then any rules that we set up in our game mode would carry through to both of them. But we're not necessarily building two completely different games with two completely different systems. I'm just showing you what the variations and the versions are. So for now, let's just duplicate this one, and I'll call this one top down just at the end of it. And what does this need? Well, we can stick with the same controller. So if I go into here and have a look, you can see we've got our player controller class. I can just leave that as it is. But the default pawn class, let's change that to be our top down. Now, setting this up so that it actually runs in here, because at the moment if we actually start playing, you'll see we've got our side scroller character. Well, he's there because obviously the main game mode is set up to launch with that default pawn. From this player start, that is the default pawn that's going to load up. So what we need to do is just say for this map we're going to override that. We're going to choose to use a different game mode, and because we use a different game mode, it can have its own default kind of starter controllers, starter pawns, and so on. Now to get that, you're going to need this world settings option here. If you can't see that, you go to Window and World Settings. It will appear over here, and you can see we can then do a game mode override. So I'm just going to change this to be my top-down one that I've just created. And now if I press play, there you can see I've got my top-down character. Now at the moment, pressing WASD, he's not doing anything. So what I'm going to look at doing now is setting up the inputs that we're going to need in order to make our character move up, down, left and right. I'm going to do this with WASD. You can always come back afterwards once I've done the WASD and just do the exact same controls again with gamepad, with directional keys, whatever suits you. So what should we do? Let's go into our inputs folder, and I'll maybe want to start organizing these into different folders. You can see I've got my IA move right. I've just put SS into the names of these because these are going to be specifically side scroller. So let's create ourselves a new input action in here. This one might be IA underscore, let's go with TD for our top down, and we'll go with this one being 4 directional. Now, let's compare the two options we've got here, the move right and our 4 directional. So if I open up the move right and I open up the 4 directional, the move right, when we look at the value type, you can see that it uses an axis 1D. That means that it's one float value that goes up and down. It can go negative, it can go lower than 0, and it can go positive and go higher than 0. And basically it's going to run as something like -1 through to 1. If I'm looking at -1, then it's going to be moving to the left. If it's going to be 1, it's going to be moving to the right. Now that's great if we've only got one direction. So what do we do if we've got up, down, left and right? Well, in our move 4 directions here, what we're going to need to do here, we don't have a 4 directional option, but we have the axis 2D. And the axis 2D essentially works as 2 axis 1Ds, 2 floats, but we can assign one of them to be up and down and one of them to be left and right. And it's that negative 1 to 1 that creates those different directions. If it's working on the horizontal and it's negative, it's going to be going to the left. If it's working on the horizontal but it's positive, it's going to be going to the right. And the same with vertical, obviously. Positive going up, negative going down. So we're just going to set that for now to axis 2D, vector 2D, and that's all we need to do inside of there, but we do need to go and set ourselves up now and new mapping control context. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new mapping context rather than trying to put this one in and put it into the exact same folder. Rather than putting it into the same one, what I'm going to do is make a new one, and the reason for that is because obviously we've already got some inputs being used by the one that's already there, and we don't want to end up having conflicting things about which one of these inputs would consume the A and the D key, for example. So with this imctd, let's open it up, add a new mapping, and we'll create this one as move 4 directions. Now it starts with 1, and what I like to do here is I like to think, well, what are the different options that I'm going to have? Well, I've got W, A, S and D, so let's add those in. 1, 2, 3, 4. W, A, S and D. Now that makes sense to put them in that way, but actually to keep it logical in your approach, what I actually find useful is to go through them and think about them as the kind of the corresponding pairs. So for example, I press this keyboard, press W, the corresponding pair that goes with that one would be S, because that's going to be my up and that's going to be my down. Same here, I'm going to have the D and I'm going to have the A. And you might go, well, why didn't I do A and D? And again, the reason for this is I've got the positive with the negative, the positive with the negative, the paired for vertical and the paired for horizontal. And then that's not necessary. You don't have to do that, but approaching it like that makes it just that little bit more understandable, easier to digest, and look at it and go, okay, well, which one of these things goes against the other one? Which one is the opposite direction to the other ones? Now, what we want to do here is we want to get these working in our character. We want to get W, S, D, and A actually triggered in our character. Now, this might be actually where we would benefit from having a different controller for this second one. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this one. This is our controller that we already made. I'll put TD at the end of this one, and I'm going to open this one up. And the reason why I'm doing this is just because this one uses the IMC for side scroller. So this one will use the top down, and we'll just make sure that in our game mode override, so you can see world settings, game mode override, I'll find that game mode, open it up, and we'll just tell it to use the top down version instead. Now, obviously, if you're making a top down game, you don't need to do all these things because you've already set this thing up to be a top-down controller with a top-down game mode with a top-down character. But I'm just setting this up so I've got the two options just so I can jump between with the different demos which one is most appropriate. Okay, so now that we know that our character is going to be using this, let's go into our top-down character. They have nothing in there right now, so let's go and add in an event. It's an enhanced input event, and it's our move 4 directions. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, for now, print out our action value. And well, let's look at this. We've got an action value that rather than being a single float, it's this blue vector 2D structure. So I want to really understand what's going on here. You don't need to do all this. I'm just going to try and help you to understand what's going on. So I'm going to append, and I'm going to take the X value, a little bit of a space afterwards, and I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to take this one to be my Y value. And I just want to show you how these enhanced input keys here are working. Now, what do I use for B in both of these? Well, this action value here, it is a structure. Structures mean that there's going to be lots of variables contained inside of there, and that means that we can take it and we can break it to get the individual ones from there. So you can see now I have an X which I can plug in, and I have a Y that I can plug in. Okay, so we're going to take the X value and we're going to print it out. We're going to take the Y value and we're going to print it out. Now, actually, what might be a little bit more approachable is maybe taking these things and mapping them into one single one, if you want to just say, but I'm just using this as a debug. So maybe having 4 different options in the append so I can see X equals, Y equals. But just for now, let's get testing with this. And what we should see is that it's printing out, there we go, the X and the Y. And what we'll do in our print string is we'll just say X value, and this one can have a key of Y value. And that basically means if these print out, if there's a print string that already exists with that print, then it means that it overrides it. So now it's only printing out once. Now I'm pressing W, I'm pressing S, I'm pressing A, and I'm pressing D. But there's nothing actually changing. All of them are coming out as one. Now that's important. There's a reason why I've done that, and it's so that I can show you what the differences are going to be in terms of each of these and how we get these so that we can have up, down, left, and right. So let's think about these logically. We want, first of all, A to be to the left and D to be to the right. We already have X equals 1. So if we think about that, that means that D is completely correct because we're moving on the x-axis, we're moving horizontally, and we're moving positively, so we're moving to the right. So how do we make A go in the opposite direction? Well, we're just going to add a modifier to that one, and the modifier we're going to add is going to be a negate. And what that's going to do is it's just going to basically multiply that value by a -1, making it a negative. So now this is my D, x equals 1, and this is my A, which is x minus 1. So right, left, right, left. Now we still have the same problem that W is X and S is X positive. So let's go and have a look at those now. How do we get these to be a different axis? Well, this is because of the keys, and the key automatically takes the value and assigns it. Even if we've got X, Y, and Z, it applies it to the first value that is there, which is our X. So no matter how many vector 2Ds and options that we have, or a vector 3D, even though I've got X, Y, and potentially Z, the key, the keyboard key, is just feeding that directly in and going, this value should be assigned to the first thing that's there, well, that's X. So no matter what I do, the value always goes to X. And I don't want that. I want them to go to Y. So with our W and our S, what we need to do here with these modifiers is actually add modifiers and go for a swizzle input axis values. And that allows us to reorder the X, Y, Z to choose which one of these is going to receive the input value first. So I'm going to add that for the W and add it for the S. And in their options, I actually don't need to change anything because the default ordering for this now is that Y, X, Z, which means that the first value will go to the Y. So you can see here, useful for binding the one-dimensional inputs to the Y-axis for 2D actions. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. Now let's go and just test this out again. So I've got my D and I've got my A, both perfect, both on the X, both going 1 and -1. What about our W? W is on the Y and S is on the Y. I keep on pressing S, keeps on pressing Y, but obviously it's not going negative, and we know how to do that now because we've just seen it for D and A. So if we want S to go down, well, what we're going to do here is we're going to add another modifier, and you can have as many as you want. Just make sure that they are left with something in them and not left to none, because that's where you get errors. And this one's going to be a negate. So what this should mean now, if I go and test this, is that if I go through each of these, W is positive Y, S is negative Y, D is positive X, and A is negative X. So that's our 4 different options, and that's obviously going to get us set up now for us to be able to move our character in all 4 of those directions, and using that to determine their movements, their animations, and even more, because we're going to use that actually to determine which way they're facing, flipping over their sprites, using it for potentially which direction they're attacking in, because we can use this to say, well, if I'm pressing to move us to the left, use that for which direction our attack happens in, or which direction we shoot from. There's loads of things that we can use these inputs to feed into. So we'll leave that there, and what we'll do next is we'll come back and we'll start using this to create some kind of movement onto our character. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to access more of my Unreal Engine content.